me a latte and I am ready to talk about all things gardening. So gardening is something that I really got into this last year. I tried really hard to have a garden in Lubbock, Texas. That's where we came from. It was a little difficult. And one of the first mistakes I think I made in having a garden, having a successful garden, was the fact that I literally knew nothing about it. If you had asked me, I would have told you I had a black thumb. I did. I killed literally everything. My house was a hospice for plants. And you know, you've seen those memes, like this is the place that plants come to die, not to thrive and live. So if you had told me that in a couple years, I'm gonna have this really awesome, great garden, I would have told you you're insane because plants hated me and I hated them. Now I wanted a house full of plants. I wanted to have a really cool garden. But the biggest mistake I made was the fact that I did nothing to educate myself on what it took to have a really good garden. And once I did that, it kind of made things a little bit easier. Now, have you ever tried to do something new just on your own without any sort of educating yourself on it, right? You've never read any books on it. You've never watched any YouTube videos over it. You've never done any of this. And all of a sudden you think you're gonna have this really cool thing. You're gonna learn this thing really fast. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, I tried. And I really believe that if you educate yourself fully on having a garden or growing food, that you can be successful. No matter where you live, you can be successful and have a vegetable garden or an herb garden or a flower garden, whatever it is that you want to grow, you can do it. I totally believe in you. Because if I can do it, literally anybody can do it. So first things first, I am not an expert. That is the biggest thing I want to get across in this video today. Do not look at me and think I'm an expert. Now, last year was my first year of having a good, successful garden. And why I feel like I wanted to start off on my channel with a video about gardening is just to give some encouragement for one, but for two, it's really time to start thinking about that. Now, on Instagram and on Facebook, friends, just the people I have around me, that is one of the topics that I get questions on the absolute most. I've spent tons of time sending links to people. I've spent tons of time telling people what I did to get my garden started. So I figured, why not make a video about it so I can have a place to direct people to. First thing I did was to educate myself. Remember, I'm not the expert. So there's a couple of really amazing YouTube channels that I went to for days and weeks and probably months. I spent so much time last year following my favorite gardeners. My probably number one favorite gardener that I watch here on YouTube is Roots and Refuge. Jess and Maya are absolutely amazing. They're so sweet and they have so much information and knowledge. She has a 10,000 square foot raised bed garden, which is utterly gorgeous. And then she built a high tunnel in the back. She has all sorts of animals. She's got the pigs, she's got the goats, she's got the llama. I've learned so much from her channel. So all the information you're gonna hear today is really just passing on the information that I've learned from so many different places and so many different sources. Now, if you've never grown a garden before, and you think to yourself, do I really need to do this? Do I really want to put the work into this? Because it is a commitment. Just like with growing anything, children, it's a commitment. You're gonna have to realize that it's gonna take some time and it has to be something that is a priority for you, because if you don't make it a priority to learn about it and to spend time on it, then it's not going to be successful. So if you really want to have a garden, make it a priority. But one of the first things you're going to do when you are thinking about starting a garden is find out what zone you live in. So we all live in zones, and it's so easy. It really is just kind of a little Google search on what zone do I live in for zip code XYZ, and you're gonna put in your zip code, and you'll see a map of the United States. We all live in zones based on our climate, okay? So I'm in central Oklahoma, so that's going to be zone 7. I believe I'm zone 7B, and it's kind of interesting because places in different parts of the country that you wouldn't think are in the same zone as you really are. So like we have the same climate as parts of Washington State, which is really, really interesting the way it all works. But that is going to tell you different things like your first estimated or your last estimated frost date and your estimated first frost date. So that is going to tell you around the time you can start planting things outside. Now that frost date is really important, especially when you're starting seeds. So if you pick up a seed packet right here, we have some black turtle beans. It's a little bit intimidating because I didn't grow them last year, but I'm determined to learn how to grow all the things. Now, if you look at a packet and it is going to tell you it's going to tell you to either start indoors or direct seed. So these beans say direct seed after last frost. That means I'm going to plant the seed straight into the ground after my last frost date. Now, when you look up your zone, you're gonna know all that. You can't know those dates unless you know what zone you live in. That's gonna tell you what you can grow, what's easier to grow in your area. So the second thing you really, really, really want to know, other than your zone, is what type of garden do you want to have? Now, there's so many different factors, and you can do a simple Google search too on why would I pick a raised bed garden over an in-ground garden. For me, I did a lot of research into no-till gardening, and I really loved the concept of just building up your soil. I've heard tons of people say, I can't grow plants, my soil is terrible. I disagree. I do believe you can grow in areas that have terrible soil. And it's all about building that soil back up, building the microbiome of your soil back up. And you can do that in so many different ways, by topping off with compost or putting in mulch, putting in, a wood chip mulch, whatever it is that you choose, you can build up your soil. Now, I started my garden off with cardboard. So I was really lucky. I had a squared off garden, and I can show you some pictures. I had a squared off garden that had a fence around it. Luckily, the previous owners put it in there, but it was covered in Bermuda. And so I thought, how in the world am I going to turn this into a garden? Do I have to rake it all off? Do I have to till it up? And the more I researched, the more I realized that tilling actually isn't the best, because what you're doing is overturning the grass seed and the weeds, and you're basically giving what's there new life. Now, you don't want to give the weeds new life, right? So I found this really cool method where people would lay down cardboard to kind of choke out what was underneath and top it with inches and inches of mainly compost, and you're going to plant straight directly into the compost. Now, that's really, really cool. Now, I know tons of people who garden who do till, and they love it that way, and that's awesome too. There's so many different ways to do things. But then you're gonna really consider if you're gonna want to do, raised beds might be a thing. There's so many cool ideas out there on the internet. People are so ridiculously creative on how they build their garden beds. And a lot of people are reusing materials they may find around their property or find somewhere else. Now, one of the pros to raised beds is that you have a little bit more control of what goes on in there, right? That doesn't mean you're not gonna have weeds, and it doesn't mean it's gonna be absolutely perfect, but some people choose to do raised beds because they know exactly what's gonna go on in there. They're gonna put compost every year at the beginning of the season and kind of keep that soil rich and awesome. Now, I chose to do in-ground gardening. This year, I'm gonna double my garden space because I really wanted to add like a potato patch, onion patch, something like that. Did grow a few grow bags of potatoes last year, and I found out that it was ridiculously fun. Like, you had these gorgeous plants, and then you dug in the dirt and you popped out, handfuls of potatoes. And I thought, honestly, I nerded out. It was the coolest thing ever. And so potatoes is definitely on my radar. Now, I could talk forever about the difference between in garden and raised garden, but that's one of the decisions that you're gonna have to make as far as how you want to grow. Now that's going to be one of the decisions you're definitely going to have to make before you even get started. Do you want to grow in ground or do you want to grow in raised beds? There's pros and cons to both. Now the other thing you're going to want to find out is what you want to grow, okay? So consider your climate, consider your zone. If you live in a really, really dry area that it gets really hot and you may not want to have to water so much, you may not want to pick plants that are of the tropical variety. That wouldn't make a whole lot of sense because you'd be spending a ton of money on watering. And if you're anything like us when we were back in Texas, our city had very frequently had water restrictions. So you could only water at certain times of the day or certain days because of drought conditions. Now you don't want to get into a type of situation where you're trying to grow plants that require way more water than you're really allowed to even water. So knowing what you want to grow is super important, because if you say, I really want to grow cauliflower, or yes, I totally have my seeds right here because I couldn't stand to not show you. Or I want to grow kale, cauliflowers, cabbages, kale. This is what's called the brassica family. These are cold weather loving crops. So if you want to grow these and you also want to grow tomatoes, you're going to have to find out when they like to grow. Tomatoes, okra, zucchini, and squash, those are heat loving plants. So you're going to plant those in the ground at quite a bit of a later date. Then you're going to plant some of your frost hardy, that means they can handle a little bit of frost. You're going to plant these cold loving plants at a completely different time. Okay, so you have to know what you want to grow. I would definitely say don't start off this way. It's really overwhelming. I basically I'm doing this to myself and I know it. I know I'm probably getting in over my head with all of these varieties of seeds. But I couldn't help myself. Like, who doesn't want to grow red burgundy okra, right? I realized last summer, or come on, pink okra. Who doesn't want it? Come on. Like my okra to match my hair, please. Please give me all the pink okra. So I wouldn't start off by buying 50 varieties of plants, right? You're gonna get overwhelmed. Start off by thinking, what does my family eat the most? Do you use a ton of bell peppers in cooking? Do your kids love to eat cucumbers? Or would you have the time, if you had an overabundance of cucumbers, would you want to pickle them? Do you love to eat okra in the summer? Different things like that. It's really important to know what your family will eat, because why spend the time in taking up space in your garden to grow something that your family may not touch? Now, I grew radishes twice this year. I grew them in the spring and I grew them in the fall. I'm the only one who will eat radishes. 3 kids and a husband who won't eat radishes. Now, I did find out the goats loved them, but I grew all of these radishes mainly just because it was fun and they were really easy to grow and I could kind of plant them in between my other plants, but nobody else would eat them. So I had pounds of radishes and I was the only one, and I kind of got tired of some radishes. So really be aware of what you're growing, and if your family's gonna eat it at all. Why grow something if nobody in your house is gonna eat it? Or if you're gonna be the only one eating it, it doesn't really make sense to take up space in your garden. Now, if you use a lot of onions or garlic, those are things you can definitely plant and have a really good harvest of, and that's something that's gonna be used a whole lot. So the other thing you really want to know is find out when you need to start planting. This is the time of the year you're gonna think about these things, okay? It is January. I have already ordered all of my seeds for the year. There's a few herbs and a few different companion plants that I really, really wanna get, but for the most part, I have all the food that I want to grow already. Lots of people, just because due to COVID last year in 2020, there was a seed shortage. There's a lot of seed companies and a lot of gardeners saying, do not wait on your seeds, because if you do, you might not get what you want. So I would really start thinking about that ahead of time. Even before, if you don't know quite yet, you wanna do in-ground or raised bed, you might wanna get a few seeds of some things that you really, really want to grow. All this different seeds that you're going to have, they will tell you sometimes start indoors, 6 to 8 weeks. Most things are gonna need to be planted or started 6 to 8 weeks before the last frost. So what does that mean to you? So for example, I'm in zone 7, and my last frost date is April 3rd. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take that date, and that's not a hard and fast rule. We may have a late frost, say like April 10th, and if I just rush outside on April 3rd and plant all of my plant starts, there's a chance that I'm going to lose all of them, okay? So try to have a little bit of patience. Like, I know it's so hard. I have zero patience when it comes to this stuff. Absolutely zero. So just check your weather, right? So when you get to that point in time where you're like, okay, it's my last frost date, check your weather. And if you're seeing temperatures dipping down into low 30s, do not go outside and plant your plants because you're gonna lose them, okay? And that would be super sad. So seed starting indoors is going to be another thing that I'm probably gonna come on here pretty quick and talk about, because that's something I'm gonna be doing myself within this next week or so. I do start seeds indoors. I do have grow lights. I have them, I don't have a fancy setup. I basically last year had them all sitting on my kitchen table until they got, sprouted a little bit, and then they were in my closet. Yes, I had plants in my closet with grow lights. I could totally put them in my garage, but then I would have had to have bought a heat mat or a heat lamp or something to have, so they don't get too cold in the garage. So I just figured, why not? I have my dresses here, plants here. It's just the way it worked out, right? So I did get some grow lights. Grow lights are pretty essential when it comes to starting seeds indoors. There's some things that you could probably, start indoors and sit in a windowsill, but for the most part, the light is not strong enough coming in through a window. And those seedlings, once they sprout out from that soil, they're gonna get really leggy because they're really long and spindly because they're trying to reach for more light. So a grow light is one of the biggest things that has helped me start seeds indoors, okay? So you're gonna be looking at your seed packets thinking, what is hardy enough to go straight into the ground, or do I have to start all of it indoors? So there are definitely things that don't like to be transplanted. For instance, carrots. Carrots are a taproot, okay? So that means the main root, the carrot, is the actual main root, and they have little spindly things coming out. When you irritate that root by pulling it out of the little seed cell, like whatever you planted it in, you try to go plant it in the ground, for the most part, it's not going to reestablish itself. So carrots, I sow directly into the ground. I have my little row. I sprinkle the seeds in there, cover it up a little bit of dirt, and I grow them straight in the ground. Other root vegetables, beets, potatoes, all those types of things are going to be planted in the ground. Then you have some of your summer loving crops, right? So we have, so excited about this. Another thing, Jess from Roots and Refuge, all of her videos talk about Kajari melons and how good they are. I don't really know what they are, other than I think she said it's mixed between like a honeydew and a cantaloupe, maybe. I really, really want to try these, and I'm really excited. So melons, if you think of anything that has a really big seed, okay? So your squash, your zucchini, your melons, your cucumbers, a lot of your vining plants, they're gonna do really well by planting them straight into the ground. Now, if you plant them indoors and you take them out and you go put them in the ground, it kind of shocks the plant a little bit. So you're gonna have a little bit of time where it kind of has to reestablish itself and catch up. And really sometimes starting indoors versus starting outside with some plants, it kind of evens out the same. So I tried this with okra, and I tried it with some squash and zucchini plants. And I have to say that the squash and zucchini seeds and some of the okra seeds that I planted straight into the ground ended up doing just as well, if not better. They caught up so fast, they grew so fast, And they caught up to basically the other ones I had started. So I spent all this time starting them inside, 8 weeks before, and it didn't really help me much. What is even the point in growing any of your food? So like, why do I grow my own food, right? I really, really, really want to get to this place where a large portion of our food comes from our own gardens, okay? And that's something that's really important to me. Knowing what has been sprayed on my food is really important to me. My food being fresh is really important to me. The way our food system is set up right now is not really ideal. And really, for the health of my family and the health of myself, I really want our food to be of quality. Now, yes, I do make sacrifices to spend a little bit more on the food that we do buy, but why not do as much as I can to grow here while I can, while I have, young enough. I don't have babies or toddlers running around anymore. I do know people who are gardening along with having babies and toddlers, and it's doable, but I am at the point in my life where I can spend more time, or I can choose to spend more time on things like gardening. So our food's really important. I love food. I love food so much. And anybody who knows me personally knows how much I love food. So why not grow all the really cool things? Now, you don't have to go planting Kajari melons, a melon that almost nobody's heard of, right? Or pink okra or red okra, or these really crazy kales, or whatever else you can think of, or like 17 varieties of tomatoes. Oh, I totally bought 7 varieties of tomatoes and I'm so excited. But it's okay to just grow a regular tomato or regular melon or some regular cucumbers. I have found that gardening has been so peaceful. In the summer, it's one of my absolute favorite things to do. I would go out in the morning before it got too hot and just spend a lot of time in the garden. I would take my gardening basket and I would pick, and I would just really sit in the quiet, in the still of the morning. And it was the absolute best way to start your day. So I hope that answered some of your questions about, do I want to start a garden? Do I need to start a garden? Is gardening even anything I'm interested in? Or, if you stuck through all of this with me and you have never gardened or don't even plan on gardening, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm so excited to talk about something that's been truly so joyful for me to learn about. And again, I am not an expert. I don't pretend to be an expert. I just really had so much fun last year, and I truly believe that more people need to be gardening, more people need to be growing their own food. And it was so fun, and I learned from so many different places and so many sources, and I just want to help others know that they can do it too. I don't want to ever come across somebody or talk to somebody that's just too scared of starting. Jess always says in the Roots and Refuge videos, she always says, if you plant nothing, you'll get nothing. But if you plant something, you just might get something. So don't be too scared to try. I promise it's not scary. Now, don't do what I did and go spend $1,000 on building all these raised beds and filling them up and planting all these things and never educating yourself about them and just letting them die. I did that twice. So take it from me, don't do that. So at least learn a little bit about what you want to grow, what zone you live in, what type of garden you want to have. I would absolutely love any questions, any comments about, if you garden already, if you learned anything at all, let me know. I'd love to hear from you. I will be coming back really soon with a seed starting video on how in the world do you start seeds indoors. It's really, really simple. There's just a few tips and tricks that you might need to know first so it can turn out really well for you. Thank you so much for being here again. If you liked this video, liked the content I'm providing, please like and subscribe to my channel. Hopefully, I will bring you some more goodness soon.